My name is Martin Webb, and this is Tipping Point. Currently, outside the studio, nature is accelerating its ecological degradation and getting closer and closer to dangerous tipping points. Fortunately, at the same time, humanity is also accelerating our action, and we're reaching our own individual tipping points. And currently, studies show that while most people are concerned about the environment and the climate, most Americans never talk about it. Therefore, they think no one else cares either. We're here to put a stop to that problem by talking to locals who have reached their tipping point about how they're thinking differently, acting differently, and communicating differently for the climate. That's why I'm really pleased to be joined today by Sarah Sunshine Llamas, a concerned mother, daughter, wife, as well as local artist, community volunteer, and climate activist. Thank you for joining me on Tipping Point, Sarah.
Thank you, Martin, for having me. It's an honor.
So one of the reasons that I invite you, as I do for any of the guests, are I see you standing out in your concern and your awareness and your action. And so when I asked you to talk about the ways that you were thinking differently after reaching your own personal tipping points, what did you come up with in regards to how you're thinking differently for the climate?
I'm thinking a lot more positively and with more hope. When I did come to the realization how bad things are getting, it feels overwhelming. How much needs to be done, how quickly. It can shut a person down and send a person into depression, thinking that I just can't possibly do enough all myself or convince everybody else in the world to do the same. So I think now I'm just at a point where my little small differences help. We can all make a difference with just our little things that we can do every day, and it makes me feel better knowing that I'm doing something to contribute. And if everybody does these little things, it all adds up.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. We talk about how eco-anxiety is the term now, where people are, as awareness is raised, concern can be raised. And again, if people think that no one's, quote, doing anything, it can lead to despondency. So what I hear you saying is that after going in that direction, one of the ways that you're thinking differently is recognizing that we do have a part to play, and that is part of the solution. And are you seeing what research is showing, and that is that when we think differently and believe that we can make a difference, it actually alleviates some of the eco-anxiety? Is that?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So when it comes to thinking about the environment and the climate, one of the things that I think is unique about your situation is in sharing together on social media, I've heard you talk about how you're part of a family unit. You've got your husband, you've got your kids, you communicate with your mother about this. And so thinking differently, how has that impacted your relationships with your close family unit?
It's made things a lot better. We are starting to get healthier. We all had gone through periods of illness in one way or another. It manifests when the earth is not well. I think we are not well too. When we take care of ourselves, it's good for the planet. Mm-hmm. And we've been growing some herbs and using fresh produce out of our yard just a little bit. Not very much yet. Mm-hmm. But I used excuses before of why we can't do this or why we can't do that. And now it's more, well, we can do this little thing here and feel good about that.
Great. So what I also hear then is, because this has been an issue with a lot of folks, myself included, when it comes to thinking about dealing with the climate, that we have to do something big and massive. And it sounds like what you're able to do is shift your thinking, recognizing that there's a lot that can be done, as I like to say, low-hanging fruit,
yes.
That aggregated together can make quite a difference.
A big difference. Mm-hmm. A big difference.
And so after thinking differently, for most people, then it turns into change of behavior and acting differently.
Yes.
You referred to producing some of your food at home. Mm-hmm. What are some of the other ways that you find yourself acting differently now that you've reached your personal tipping point?
I'm having better conversations with people instead of criticizing for where we're wasting something here. We're looking at positive ways to give out our leftovers, and we're finding ways to save money by conserving energy and having little contests in the house and making it fun instead of, oh my gosh, we have this huge bill to figure out how to pay, or the groceries are too expensive. We're just finding all these little ways of saving.
It's well, it's interesting because that also is a common theme that we hear, is that when people do take steps, they end up oftentimes saving money, feeling happier and feeling healthier. So not only is there the benefit of helping keep the earth going and nature going, but saving money and being healthier seems to be a good incentive for doing most any activity. And so what's also interesting is that I hear you say that this is becoming something that you're able to influence your family on. I know that for some folks, individuals that live with a family unit, they might feel like the only person or the champion of the cause, so to speak, and that can create challenges and difficulties. What I like about what you said, though, is that studies also continue to show that tackling this issue in a positive light, explaining the positive things that we can do as opposed to just being morose or wagging finger, really gets better change. And it sounds like you've been able to do that.
And when you're talking about the positive changes that you're making for yourself and how that's helping your own self, then it might inspire somebody else to change rather than telling somebody, oh, you might not want to do this or that. Right.
Yeah, it's for me, I've noticed that it's almost talking about the climate and our own personal climate action can be very similar to talking about being on a diet. It's not about lecturing other people about what they're eating. It's about just commenting, well, I'm doing this because it's healthier for me. And I know for myself, that's made conversations with people easier, because it's easy to be triggered into wanting to lecture, don't do that. But I really like how you said, hey, instead of talking about what we're not doing with our food and our leftovers and we're wasting it, it's what can we do with it. And I find that really, really powerful and interesting. What other actions and behaviors do you find yourself doing outside of the family unit? Like, what are some things that just you do that the others don't? For example, I've seen you on podcasts. When I've done my podcasts, I've seen you chat and be involved. Do the other members of your family also pay attention to climate media or podcasts?
They are starting to finally a little bit. My children are teenagers, and so they watch a lot of TikTok and things. My positive outlook has helped a little bit, because I think that my doom and gloom attitude was not very good for them for a little while, especially through 2020. So we've worked a lot in the last year to bring the conversation back to positive. And I quit smoking 4 months ago.
Oh, nice.
And I decided, that's good for planet Earth too.
Absolutely.
I quit smoking. So that makes me feel good. And that also is very good for my family. They're very, very happy with that.
Sets an example for sure.
Yes. And that's what I feel like I would like to do for the environment too. And we all take trips to the farmer's market. It's in walking distance from our house, which is nice.
Nice.
And we all participate in local community activities. My mom is a volunteer at the local library and very active there.
Wait, so you all actually walk to the farmer's market? That is one of the lowest carbon ways to get food that I have yet heard.
And unfortunately, it's not a year-long one, so we have a short-term time that's there down the street at the fountain. But
I tell people, think of the farmers markets like stores with invisible walls. It's the most climate-friendly store possible, because usually we go into even the natural food grocery stores, they're using energy to control the lighting, the temperature, the volume. And a farmer's market is the lowest carbon grocery store. There are no walls, nature's in charge of the lighting, the sound, the temperature, But most people still have to drive to that low carbon grocery store. So to hear you talk about walking, like that doesn't get any.
We're really lucky to have the location we do.
That's amazing. And I'm thrilled to hear you're interacting with your kids about this, because as those of us that pay attention to the climate
Excuse me, sorry.
issue know, there is a real concern from the youth. And they are pretty well freaked out because they don't see much action from the adults in the older generations. And again, it's partially because we're not talking about it. And so they think that we're not concerned. And so that's another action that I feel like gets underlooked, is just communicating to family members. But what I hear you say is that you've worked to figure out the best ways to communicate, because we're not all using the same language, even though we're all talking English. And
it's true.
That positivity, you've tried that triggered state of lecturing, and then you switch to something more positive. Can you talk a little bit more about that transition of, hey, I used to act this way, that didn't get results. Maybe it's me. Let me talk differently.
Yeah, I'm still in transition somewhat on that. I think I've come a long way. But I've had conversations. I know a lot of people on both sides of everything, really. And so I have a wide array of friends. Some of my more conservative friends have not been very interested in some of these topics. So now I actually see them going and looking things up when I say something, and just because I'm not pointing any fingers. I'm not pointing any fingers anymore, and I'm not lecturing anyone anymore. And I just have a more positive attitude. I think people listen more when you have a positive attitude about what you're talking about.
Studies show, in regards to the climate, especially related to news, that the more alarmed people sound, the less credible the viewer thinks they are. And that people listen if we offer solutions along with, hey, these are the possible damages, and here are the solutions. And it's fascinating to figure out that there is an unfolding psychology around how to even talk about this issue, which is, we've kind of just segued right into it. My last question for all my guests is, so you're thinking differently, you're acting differently. This has become a crisis of communication. We have all the solutions, the technologies, we know what we need to do. We're not communicating. And so how you're communicating differently, I hear, is that you are open to talking to everyone as long as they're willing to hear it, and you're exploring different ways to actually engage with people. And
finding what people can do about it, because a lot of people don't. For a little while, I didn't know that my little differences could really matter. It felt like everybody has to change or there's no point.
Right.
And that's just not so. And then you can look, you have to dig for them, but in the climate report and other places, you can find positive news that's happening. People making a real difference, cleaning the plastic out of the ocean, making art with it.
So are you engaging differently on social media as well as direct interpersonal? Because there are some people that aren't really communicating about this issue in person because it can be such a charged topic.
Right.
But with social media, it's easy to just get in there and go nuts, with butting heads with people. It sounds like that you're learning how to make this subject something that can be brought up with everyone depending on the circumstances. Yeah.
I get excited when I find something local that's like biodegradable, and it's like I found one. So and everybody in the grocery store will be like, "Oh, what'd you find?"
So talk about that. Biodegradable, reuse, recycling. What I really hope viewers can get out of these chats are being inspired by our peers and community members, as opposed to bringing fancy experts on here or celebrities that are saying things that might not be useful for the average person. We're not here to just make a laundry list of things to go buy. And so for you, I'm really excited about hearing your interest and your work at making sure that this is something that people can see. It's small steps. It's not really big, giant things. So
I still have work to do. I haven't been able to eliminate all the plastic. You can't. Mm-hmm. But I try to not if I can help it.
And how do you do that?
I do look for things in glass. I do look for things in cardboard more. I buy mostly fresh. I have all reusable bags that I take to the grocery store. And then I don't put everything in bags. It just depends on what it is. Mm-hmm. But it's hard to find glass sometimes. We do have a New Earth Market that's local to our town, that locally owned, mm-hmm. and they have a lot of stuff in there that's biodegradable, and they have paper bags only and all of that. But it's really hard to find. It's really hard to find.
Now, how are you feeling about, in general, your efforts with communicating with the people in your sphere? Are you feeling as though this is something that I'm actually making a difference, or are people just humoring you and entertaining you? Are you seeing that walking the walk and talking the talk is inspiring to those around you?
It is, slowly but surely, and it varies. There's some people that are still very hard-headed about it, mm-hmm. and people are in different places with where they're coming from. So I have to worry about me. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I think compared to a year ago, because I started following KVMR and the Balance Beam and the Climate Report about a year ago now.
Okay.
And so it's been a full year. And a year ago, it's been I've come a long way. It was causing waves in my family. My family was not wanting to get on board at all. So it's exciting for me.
It's challenging because the topic is very big and immediate, and it's easy to get caught up in, oh my gosh, we all need to freak out, and oftentimes that doesn't necessarily help build the coalition of people that we need to really make action and move forward. What I like about what you said, though, and I think this is really important, and it was valuable for me when it comes to climate action, is you said, I need to worry about, take care of me. And what I've noticed is one of the worst versions of climate inaction is pointing fingers at other people and saying, mm-hmm. well, everyone else needs to do that, they should do that. If they're not doing their part, then I'm not going to do my part. And that leads to climate inaction. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's actually incorrectly judging what other people are doing. So I think that's a really valuable way to both think and act and communicate that this is about me and doing what I can. As I like to say, don't wait for someone else to play your part. We all have some kind of part to play. And what I'm curious about a little bit more is communicating with your kids about this. For viewers that might be in a home where they feel like they aren't sure what to say, how to say it, whether they should just keep their mouth shut. I know it can be hard for myself, I've experienced sharing living spaces with people where they might have different standards or ethics about wasting water or turning on lights or energy or what goes in the trash versus recycling. What would you say has been one of the keys for your success with your kids that could be translatable advice to others?
I still do struggle a little bit with my kids. I think anybody with teenagers can understand that. But I think that the most beneficial thing is to really have them helping me dig in the dirt out in the backyard and grow stuff.
That's powerful. That's powerful because a relationship with nature makes you care about it more.
Mm-hmm. And makes them more aware. And it also gives them empowerment to know that they can grow something.
You did that this year then?
Yes.
You started in the spring with them, and
yes.
Were they involved, and did they have buy-in in watching the plants grow, or was it the kind of thing where they're like,
project. In fact, it was part of it was built into my daughter's class because she had botany for her science class. So she was able to grow spinach and a couple of greens and some beans. And she had to have it in this specific gestational time and all that, and had to make notes. And she harvested it, and she got to eat it. And she said the spinach she grew was better than the stuff she got in the store.
Of course. Almost always is. Studies show, I read this recently, that when a person grows plants for their own needs, the plants actually grow differently and produce a nutrient profile that more closely meets the needs of the person that grew. When I heard that, it made me that much more interested in wanting to produce my own food.
They say too that when you get local honey, it's better because it has the pollens from the local area, so that it will help with your allergies.
Now, I want to piggyback on your gardening and gardening with the kids, because this is something that held me back for a while, and I shifted my thinking on it, and that is perfection in the results. I didn't want to grow something if I was just going to be frustrated and it was going to go south and wasn't going to produce anything. And then I realized that growing any plant is actually a carbon sink. Even if it's a total failure and you harvest nothing from it, it's actually harvesting CO2. So the more plants that we can grow in any size and shape, the more we're making a difference.
I used the excuse too that we didn't have enough sun in our backyard. Backyard is full of clay and weeds and clover, and we have bamboo back there that takes over in this one little area, and it's just not good for a garden. Well, there's still stuff we can grow. Proved it.
So
just in small amounts.
So rationalizing, because I've done the same thing. If I don't want to do something, I can rationalize not doing it. But as soon as you wanted to, suddenly. Now, the last question I have for you is this. Are you finding that as you are raising your awareness and your thoughts and your actions and communication, are you finding it easier to keep that going and find more things to do? That's what happens with me, is that it sounds like it's difficult, but it feels like once you start making a difference and looking to make a difference, you start finding it everywhere and it just becomes easier.
You find more. Well, and then it becomes a big difference, because it just started out last year with starting to take a little walk every day, because I had a foot problem from a foot injury, and I started to take a little walk every day. And that's it. And now I've quit smoking, growing gardens, and cooking up a storm, learning different recipes.
Nice.
With better foods to eat for the planet.
Instead of just getting processed in plastic from the grocery store. I'm guilty of sometimes doing that.
It's hard to eliminate all of it, and I don't beat myself up when I have little things that you just can't eliminate yet.
Well, and I want to tie it back really quick to the beginning, and that is where you talked about stopping cigarettes. And I really feel like this is very analogous. This issue of what we need to do for the climate is like dealing with an addiction. We've been raised to be dependent and addicted to fossil fuels and certain systems. We're dependent on everything for outside sources for everything, basically. Instead of making our own clothes, our own food, we're dependent on outdoors. And it really feels like a big shift is starting to happen, and it is almost like addressing an addiction. And with addictions, a lot of times it's not just flipping a switch. It's oftentimes a gentle nursing away of one way of life while adopting another one. And it sounds like that's also part of the path that you're experiencing too.
It is.
And we're just a day after Election Day, and for anyone that doubts that individual climate action matters, I would say it's very much like voting. That I don't know of anyone that's voted for federal office that is the person is won or lost by one vote. So I could say, well, your vote mathematically didn't matter. You didn't need to vote. We know that actually it's the aggregation of individuals. And the same is directly true with climate action. So I'm really proud of hearing the adopting of small things that can add up, because all of this stuff adding up together is what's created the problem by not being aware. Raising our awareness is actually helping solve it. So kudos to you. Well, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
And keep doing what you're doing, and keep inspiring me, and I hope others were inspired as well. My name is Martin Webb. This has been The Tipping Point. I've been talking with Sarah Sunshine Llamas about what she's been doing in order to address her concerns about the climate. And we hope that this is inspiring some of you to consider ways that you can also make a change. Thanks, and tune in next month for the next tipping point.